So, and I didn't quite. I think I was just genuinely terrified that I was getting to the point where theologically I was going to blow up my own career anyway because I was starting to get pissed off about some of the things that uh, public contemporary Christian culture, like the CCM culture, the evangelical coolness, and what we know today is like all the things that were public, all the publicity, all the expectations of what anybody in that space was supposed to think, and I didn't agree with a lot of it. And I wanted to talk about it and I couldn't because it would mean that I wouldn't have a job anymore. Like some kind of classic examples of that is I remember a kid coming up to my tape, more than one kid, but people coming up, "Oh, thank you. Your music saved me from a life of homosexuality. I give my music to your kids because she's butch and I don't want her to be gay." I was like,
Oh my
in my
god.
if things like people would just drive by and say like that to me 100 times a day, and I would hear it in the back of my head, I'm going, "I didn't fucking say that." Like, that's what I
Yeah.
wanted to say out loud, and I would say that out loud now if somebody attributed that to me. I would genuinely say that, but I didn't know how to say it, and I didn't know how I was gonna navigate it and was too exhausted to put up the fight.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Growing Up Christian. I'm Casey.
And I'm Jeremiah. Normally I have to wait for Sam to say something, but Sam's not here.
Sam's not here. He's taking a family vacation to Disney World, and somehow he just realized that they closed Splash Mountain, and he's super angry about it. He's just walking around Disney World whistling Dixie like a prick.
And that only recently became illegal there.
Yeah. So it's just Jeremiah and I tonight, and so we were thinking, maybe we just, like read off a list of genocide numbers.
From
You even
communist
got it pulled
regimes.
up.
Oh, I
Yeah,
do. I
like
do. I'm on the genocideeducation.org. It is worth noting all of the genocides we're about to read, none of them had AR-15s. And Casey and I would like to talk to everybody this evening about, do I keep going or are we digging too deep?
oh man, it's probably time to pull out of this.
All right, bail. So Casey, what do you think about 3D printing auto sears for firearms? Where do you come down on this?
um, I think that most of the people I know that own a 3D printer, I don't think I would want to fire a gun that they made.
Well, I don't mean the whole gun. I just mean 3D printing the part that makes it a fully auto machine gun, as the Democratic Party would call it.
Oh yeah, fully support.
Sweet. Sounds great.
I
All right,
was
now I've
watching a
got
video the other. Oh, go ahead.
well, I was gonna say I've got my top 10 list of things that I've secretly always disliked about Sam. Do you have your list ready?
Yeah. Oh
Okay,
yeah,
that was
yeah.
tonight, right?
Let's
Okay.
start at the top. It's got
Okay,
to be
so
the
he
smell.
I haven't seen him in person in so long, I don't know. But have you seen him when he had the dreads? I mean, I'm assuming that's what you're referring to.
Oh yeah, dude. Big dreads.
Yeah, big dread
That was a
guy.
look for a while. He had that for like a decade.
Well, you have to. I mean, dreads. That's not a short commitment.
Right.
At a certain point, do they stop growing just because like they're so malnourished or something?
I think so. Like I think you naturally start craving like keratin, and so you just start eating your finger and toenails. Like that's the only way that your body can maintain those. You either do that or you just smash the eggshell into your scramble in the morning.
He recently got a haircut though. It does look good.
He's a
He,
handsome man.
he's a handsome man. He looks like he's de-aged a few. Maybe he always just looks really stressed on the podcast or something, but he looks like he's having fun in Disney World.
So Sam and Jesse, our other buddy, always they're always chiding me on the types of things that I send them on Instagram because my feed is like very tailored. I follow a lot of like cringe channels, and I just it's just like human scum doing terrible things.
Oh, I know. We send these things to each other all the time. I feel like our Instagram algorithms are pretty well dialed in. Like I
We're
can,
s we're
you have
syncing
certain
up.
friends. Yeah, you've got certain friends where you could tell like, oh, I'm sending this to this person, to this person. I've got like my top 5 rotation of people that like every night there's going to be at least 2 or 3 things. I'm like, oh, that's a Casey. That's a Casey meme for sure.
It's like if you're trying to picture who that list of people is for you personally, who is the first person that you send Kid Rock shooting like a package of
But
Bud Light to? That's the kind of friend that we're talking about.
I think you are the first person I would have sent that to.
I take a lot of pride in that.
And then I've got
Honestly,
another
that's
friend that I can
makes
tell, like,
me.
if he's sending me memes, I'm like, "Don't open these around people. Like, you gotta go somewhere very private."
So,
Uh,
recently I've gotten probably a little too into watching hoarders
okay. The
on
show or just miscellaneous hoarders on Instagram?
just sneaking up and looking in their windows.
Okay.
There's definitely a hoarder that lives down the road from me because
Mm,
I got some of the wrong mail in my mailbox one day, and I was like, okay, I think it's these people that live down here, and they have a weird. So they're one of those houses that you drive by in the middle of nowhere that you're like, wow, is this like 3 generations of old trucks that no one's ever sold? They just kind of like park them out back.
yep.
Like the guy owns a limousine that he drives for personal
Personal
uses, I
use.
guess. It's for sale right now if you want me to get you a price on it. It's been parked
Uh,
out by the road for weeks.
what's it based on? What's the base car?
It's like a Cadillac
Okay.
Ville or something like that.
Okay, respectable. Yeah.
It looks awful. Like I think if it doesn't sell pretty soon, he's probably just going to chop the back off of it and use it as a pickup.
I mean, for out there in the country, that would honestly be fine. Like, I bet that'd be a lot of room.
So that's the kind of place this is. There's a lot of like dilapidated buildings around it. They have one of those windmills from Harbor Freight in the backyard that I don't
Mm.
know if it's powering anything. I don't know, probably a e-cigarette charger or something.
I was gonna say it probably
But
runs something based on a still.
yeah. So I had to go up there and take this mail to their house, and my I was gonna knock and make sure it was theirs. So I pull up and I go up to the door and I knock, and the windows are like they're the windows are discolored on the house. They're like they have a greenish tint,
Oh,
and you can just
okay.
look through and see chaos in there, you know? And there's a lot of animals barking and making noise and stuff like that, and you're looking around at all these different. You know what it looks like? It looks like, where Reggie Ledoux lived in, True Detective.
Yep, okay. That tells me what I need to know, and there's a
That is
lot of those
exactly
houses in
what
my hometown.
Dude, that is exactly what it looks like. I never thought about that until now, but you could just see like a white trash dude in a gas mask and whitey tidies, like strutting out back with a sawed off shotgun. That would match this so well. So I knocked a couple of times, and then I kind of got creeped out, and I just sort of like left the mail piled in front of their door.
Yeah, why didn't you just put it in the mailbox?
That's a good question. I probably
Okay.
should have done that. Maybe
Yeah,
I
I
was
just
curious and I wanted to look in the window,
yeah,
like
that's not a very good
subconsciously.
sense of self-preservation. Like, I'm hearing a lot of red flags in that story. To me, that seems like a barely pull into the driveway, throw everything in the mailbox, back out as quick as possible.
I think I'm definitely like the first person to die in a horror movie, you know? And like if you hire me to house sit, I'm going to look through your drawers. I for
Yeah,
sure will.
that's always been one of my fears if ever having someone house sit. Like, I would never dream of doing that in someone else's house I was in. But my assumption is if someone comes over even to let the dog out, they're going to let the dog out, then immediately come running into our bedroom and just start ripping drawers out. Just
Be- yeah, that's what I'd be running around your house wearing your boxer briefs on my head like Spider-Man.
I'll keep that in mind.
I don't do any house sitting, so it's okay for me to say this.
We creeped out some friends once because we have Ring cameras on the outside and the inside of the house, but the inside ones we only turn on if we're like if we've left and we've armed the house. Like we have them so we can keep an eye on where the dog is and stuff, like not for anything else. But uh once we forgot to switch them off when people were coming over to house sit the dog, and I think they had something else going on. They were about to go to a uh an event or something, so they ended up just hanging out in the living room with our dog for maybe like 15 minutes, at the end. And so we came on the camera and just started talking to them, which we thought was going to be really funny, and it wasn't as funny as we thought it was going to be. We had a good laugh and got over it, but apparently those cameras don't sound that great.
Really? They were pretty creeped out?
Pretty creeped out. I mean, they got over it and laughed really quick, but I didn't like start it by like, "Hi guys, it's me." Like we definitely started it more of like a "Hey, hey, hey," and just kept doing that until they started looking around. And then I think one of them saw the blue light on the camera that showed it was on, and then we just came clean. But after that, I was like, "Why did I think that was going to be funny?" I'm not sure. Like I didn't go into that with a plan.
You were like, "This is the ghost of Jerry Falwell. The gays killed me."
Oh
No, okay. So, Hoarders,
yes.
there's an episode of Hoarders that if you're the person in your friend group that people send that kind of stuff to because they know you'll like it, there's an episode of Hoarders that you have to watch. And I've seen it talked about like on several other podcasts and stuff. But the person that it's about is a lady named Shauna,
Hmm.
and it's just the wildest episode of TV I've ever seen.
Okay, what makes it wild?
She has like she's been storing her crap for like decades. She is just water bottle like those big water bottles that go in like a water cooler. She just
Yeah.
has an entire room filled with water bottles like that of her own like poop and pee.
Oh, no septic system. Like she's just storing. Is she capping them off?
Yeah, I mean, as much as that matters, yes.
I mean, it definitely makes a difference if it's a full room.
I don't think it. I couldn't. I'm not sure on how the differentiation was made because some of it ended up in bottles that got thrown into this room, right? Some of
Mhm.
it. So she had a bucket. She's got a bucket that she's been using, right? A
Right.
5 gallon bucket from like Home Depot, and the bucket gets too heavy when it's full. So she's in there with a coffee mug. She scoops it into a smaller pan, which she then carefully carries to this house. That there is not a path through this house. Like it's literally just like an obstacle course with a cookie sheet full of week
Do you
old
think
birds.
do you think it should be legal? Obviously you'd have to have a court conviction, but it should be legal to napalm somebody's house, like your local government just hit it with a fire strike from a plane. Like you can't.
You just give her like 50, like distribute leaflets like we did in Vietnam. Like, hey,
Right, like
15 minutes, this place is going up.
we don't believe in any actual like mental health services in this country. Let's not pretend like this woman is ever going to come back from this. Like give her a swift clean death. That's the best you can possibly do. And it's one of
Dude,
those things.
she's like,
It's like Chernobyl. They're gonna have to slide like a concrete dome over the area, firebomb it, and then just leave it for like a generation and come back.
just build a blast furnace around the house with a chimney that goes to space.
They say it
Oh,
burned
it's
for 80 days and nights.
dude. What's great about it too is like the lady is funny. Like she's actually kind of hilarious because she's sort of like snarky and quippy with the way that she says things.
Okay.
So I at one point the guy goes and he's going to stay the night in this house just to get a feel for like how she's been living.
Oh, he's not
And
being paid enough.
no. No. But he's in there and he's like, "Well, where do you cook dinner?" Because the kitchen is just filled with crap, right? And so she's in the kitchen. All she's got that works anymore is this like it's like a microwave oven,
Mhm.
right? And so she's cooking dinner while he's standing there. She just dumps like a can of Progresso clam chowder into a paper bowl and then puts the paper bowl in the microwave oven and turns it on for 20 minutes. And he's like, I'm smelling something burning. She's like, oh yeah, it burns. She takes it out, and this bowl is like, it's like destroyed. It's barely like there's microscopic fibers that are holding the bowl together around this pile of clam chowder. And
What
it's
does
just
clam chowder
singed all
smell
around it.
like? What clam chowder microwave for 20 minutes is gonna be horrible.
And then imagine that like being funneled into a water bottle and stored in the closet 2 days later.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I bet it looks about the same when it's going into that bottle.
And then like, but no, oh, what I was saying is she's got this pan full of like excrement, and she's like tiptoeing through her house, going, "Oh, don't spill, don't spill, don't spill." And she goes out the door and just flings it into the front yard. It's insane.
Does she ever explain like how this started? Like, there has to be a moment. There's a moment in this woman's life where she's like, I'm just gonna put it in a bottle. Like, you fit on the road. You know, you drive more than just about anyone else I know. Have you ever had to pee in a water bottle on like while you're on the highway because you didn't have another option?
I see. Okay, I've tried.
Well, you live in a
I've
state where I
tried
guess
like
okay.
many years ago,
Mhm.
and I can't pee in that position.
Oh, so you're just
And I
saying you
can't
weren't
even
desperate enough.
explain it. It's got to be like a mental block.
Uh-huh.
Like my body just won't be willed into doing it. But I tried it years and years ago, right after college, because I was like desperately trying to get to New Jersey in time for something.
Okay, yeah,
And
we're describing different situations then. I'm talking about a situation where it's like I'll be peeing inside of 5 minutes and it's gonna be in the car or it's gonna be
that's
or I
kinda
gotta
how
think of
this
something
was.
else.
Uh, so honestly, no, I don't think I ever have. I don't think I ever
Okay.
have.
Well, it's
But
like
I
I
see
bet
a lot of those scattered along the highway.
oh, what a
That's
cool state you live
that's
in.
not people's like. oh, I guarantee you, we could find some pea jugs if
Oh, that's
if we
I'm
cruise the
sure.
highways of Virginia.
I used to work landscaping. I weed trimmed a lot of ditches. Like there's nothing
You
that
just
part of my
hit
soul
one
has
and
been
it
burned
goes off
off.
like a grenade.
Yeah, 100%. Or you hit somebody's old food container that's been rotting and baking in the sun for weeks. I've hit more than probably more than 30 dog pies. Like
That is the worst. I've done that too, and it's like it's
one was
just an
so
instant day
soupy.
ruiner.
It was so soupy it was dripping off my safety glasses.
Oh my god.
There was one once. I'm taking a detour here, but there was this house. This was probably the greatest day of work I ever had working this job. Um, we cut grass and did tree work and whatever at a lot of vacation houses on this particular island that was an offshoot. It wasn't a very rich community, but this one island had a lot of people that like they bought nice houses and that were they came for vacation. This one guy only came there for like Thanksgiving and Christmas. That was it. I think he lived somewhere in Northern Virginia or DC. And so the house was, I think, from the 60s or 70s. It was a fine house. It was on the water on this peninsula, but he just decided he was like, we're going to bulldoze the entire thing and build a brand new house here. And we had to go there and do a few miscellaneous things the week that they were getting all the heavy equipment there to actually tear the house down. And so we were like, can we tear holes in the house? Like, would that be cool? And my boss kept saying, no, no, no. Well, the last day we were there, I'll double back for the actual story I was going to tell. But the last day we were there, the wrecker had pulled off like one piece of the house. Like it had, it was a backhoe and it just went down from the roof through both floors to the foundation, but they'd pulled off maybe 10 feet of the house and the rest of the house was still standing. And so he saw that and he was like, well, and we just went back to the truck and got like sledgehammers and chains and everything else. And we spent about an hour just beating holes in this house. I got to use a sledgehammer and like beat a doorknob through a door. I tried to kick through storm glass, which I couldn't do. I threw a frozen jug of water we found all the way through a wall. we the floor was already in bad shape. I mean, the house, it probably needed to be destroyed, and so we just hit it with axes and stuff until we were able to make the tub fall from the 2nd floor to the 1st floor, and then it was creaking bad
Oh,
enough, we were
that
like, "Alright, let's not tempt fate." But anyway, at this house, um, we had to clean out the pool. They had an old pool there that had been drained and then had just collected a bunch of, like, rainwater and everything else, so it was, like, super dark green, smelled pretty nasty, had about 2 feet of water in it. So, my boss was getting like a sump pump down in there. So we had a generator and a sump pump and a few other things. And he was trying to prime this pump, couldn't get it to prime, couldn't get it to prime. It smelled so bad. He kept having to like gag and pull himself out of the pool and like get a couple fresh breaths of air and then go back in there, like hold his breath. And he's trying to get it to
really? It was
prime.
that bad?
It smelled horrible. And I mean, because it'd been baking in the sun like for probably a year before it got to this point. The guy just hadn't come down and used the house in a while, and he finally got it to prime. And it like that's the only reason he got in the pool in the first place was he couldn't get it to prime, so he had to like climb down there and mess with it. And he had waiter boots on, but when it finally primed, like it coughed to life, and it was like a gas powered one, and so it coughed to life and then just spewed like 20 feet up in the air. Uh, all the junk that it was sucking up. There was like mice carcasses and trash and all kinds of stuff. And it was just
Oh,
raining. It was like we were all running away from the pool as fast as we could. We had to go like down to the because he was on the river. We all like rinsed ourselves off in the river because it smelled so bad. He was like, nobody's getting in the truck. Like we can't leave this property until we figure this out. It's so bad. It was like just
oh
misting this
man.
putrid trash all over us. But anyway, what I was gonna say was I've had to pee in a bottle. That's where the story started. I've had to pee, I've had to pee in a bottle a couple times while on a road trip, but that was always like a, I don't have a choice. This is a desperate situation type thing. And you always dispose of it immediately and wash your hands immediately and then feel weird for maybe like a couple hours. At some point, this lady crossed over from like, well, maybe it was really cold and I don't want to go outside and something about her septic system's not working. Like, you can forgive the peeing in a bottle maybe once, but then she crossed over into like, well, it would just be easier if I just never fixed this. And I just kept going. Where did she get the water bottles?
She
Like the
was
water
okay,
cooler.
so it was generational. So her
Oh,
mom was a
was the
hoarder.
was the poop generational?
I that was almost the impression that I got, yeah.
Oh
Because at
no.
one point she's like, "This was my mom's dirty water jug." Like the one that she was carrying, the smaller container that she carries it out and throws it into the lawn with. That was handed down to her. It's a family heirloom.
Can you sentence someone to death for this? like like I'm on to her mom now. That's where like the anger's going. How can you do that and then to your child?
I don't know. There's a lot of
Okay.
people that do. Like almost everybody on that show has kids, and a lot of them are living in the middle of like their disaster.
And what's the point of the show? Are they trying to like help these people like clean their house up, or is it literally just look how much this person sucks? All right, see you next week.
Oh, no, they clean up their house. They kind of go in and try to like start the therapy process while
Hmm.
cleaning the house out because it's kind of a repetitious thing where like they go in, they meet with the family and the people. Most of the time, I'd say about 70% of the people are like, yeah, this is out of control. I really need to, this something needs to be done about this. They rarely like take any responsibility for it. They're just like, look what's happened. And and then there's 30% of them that are just like rotten pricks about it that you just want there's people that are so mean on there about their stuff. Like their families there trying to help them because they're pooping in a bucket or whatever. And like these people are just so mean to their family members. And it makes you wonder, like, you're
Probably
sitting there
because they're
watching
really
it.
sick of them. They've been trying to help them for years, and they've just been pushing them away. Like, I don't know.
Oh no, no, no. The hoarder is mean to the family who's
Oh,
trying to help
oh,
them.
oh.
And there's a lot of them on there where you're like, what is this weird like biological impulse to like take care of your mom who is just the worst person alive? Like if this person is your mom, like just cut your losses and just never talk to them again, you know? But they're
It's that
always
easy.
like, "Oh, I just hate to see my mom like this." And like, your mom sucks, dude. She sucks. Let her just live in there. The worst though is like when they have animals. Like there's a lot of them that have a lot of pets,
Oh, of
and
course. Yeah.
it's dark. Those ones are really dark.
Because you assume that, like, there's pets being, like, born, living, and dying and rotting in those houses that they're not aware of?
They always find dead ones.
Mm.
They're like, well, I know I have 30 cats, but then they find like 10 dead ones in the mix. It's awful. It's just like horrible to see. And then luckily a lot of times that like comes with intervention from like the humane society or whatever, and like they won't be allowed to have pets anymore. Or they'll let them keep
Won't be
one, but
allowed.
they're
Yeah,
like
that's a person that's really living by the rules of the law. That they got their 30 cats one at a time for the Humane Society, I'm sure.
they're on the radar. They're
Okay.
they're they're on the
They're a
red
person
flag
of
list.
interest. They get no knocked for how many illegal cats they have. Has there ever been, I'm sure mostly it's like cats and dogs and maybe parrots, mice, whatever. Are there ever any like really exotic pets? Someone's like, well, I had a boa constrictor 8 years ago. Haven't seen him lately.
Now my house is the Everglades. There was a guy who had a million rabbits that had just like eaten his house. They they were like there was I don't know how I don't even remember how many rabbits they pulled out of this place. And I don't remember them finding any dead rabbits. The rabbits took care of themselves pretty good, but they had destroyed this house. And like 15 minutes into the episode, you find out like, oh, this isn't his house. He's renting this house. He's lived here
Oh,
for like 8 years, and in that time has completely destroyed it. And the guy is just the most vile, awful prick that you've ever seen.
when you said take care of themselves, you mean like the rabbits are eating the other rabbits?
That could
Like
be.
they do. Like I assume that's what you meant. Like they absolutely do that.
I guess they are rodents, aren't they? Are they rodents?
Uh, well, this is one of
They're
the least bad things I've
rodent-like.
Googled for this show.
Dude, everything will eat everything. Like
Uh,
I was watching an animal show the other day, and they showed a deer eating a chipmunk.
okay, so rabbits are small mammals in the family Leporidae, which contains hares. I thought hares were just English rabbits. Um, I'm scrolling down. There was something.
All
Okay, so
rabbits have buck teeth.
they used to be considered rodents. Interesting.
Now they're
But
their own
now,
separate species.
yep, rodentia does not include rabbits. Rabbits differ from rodents in having an extra pair of incisors and other skeletal features. Shrews, moles, and hedgehogs are also not rodents. They are classified in the mammal order Eulipotephla. I
Oh
really
man, a
thought
guy
hares.
hoarding moles would have the
Yeah,
worst yard in the world.
I really
Just
thought
broken
hares.
ankles.
I really thought hares were just rabbits from Europe.
Yeah, there's a weird line of distinction in there somewhere. Like
Yeah,
a hare is like an ugly rabbit. It's like a rabbit that's been stretched.
right, an English one.
This is by far the
Hares have
most ridiculous intro we've ever done.
hares are distinguished from rabbits by their larger size, longer ears, and longer hind legs. They also tend to live alone or in pairs in above ground nests where rabbits often live together in groups of up to 20 in underground tunnels known as warrens. They look really
Or
stinking
people's
similar.
walls.
Right. So the rental thing, that is also, that's the number one reason I don't think I ever want to be a landlord. Like we've talked about, I like everything about our house except its location. It's in the middle of like a residential neighborhood. And if I could take our house and put it in the middle of like 10 acres outside of town, I'd be super happy. And we've talked about like buying a house that's farther away from town and just renting this one out because we got it for right before the housing market exploded. Like we bought this in 2018. So we've got good equity in it. But like I just, it's, and I'm not even like attached to this house. I just don't think I could stand someone else living in it, knowing that I would have to have stuff repaired when they left.
Well, I'll tell you what. The landlord, the house owners showed up. It was a couple. They lived in a different state. They showed up in the middle of the show to survey the damage, and they were way calmer about it than I would have been. I mean,
See,
this
that's where
place
I
is
would be like,
destroyed.
yeah, I would be going for the napalm like sentencing.
You all have to sit around the dinner table and then pull the pin on a grenade like it's the siege of Berlin.
That's true. You could give people a choice. It's like, we're going to napalm this house. You can be in it, and then you're spared of all this shame. You don't have to do anything about it. You don't have to be accountable. Or we're going to napalm it, and we're going to drop you off in the middle of the Canadian wilderness with like a backpack. Like that. Those are your choices.
Yeah, well, the rabbit guy, nobody would be sad that that guy was gone. He was the absolute worst. So, yeah, that's a fantastic show. And yeah, you have to watch it one episode at a time or else it gets a little too depressing, but
Yeah, but I'm
some of
glad
them are
people are.
pretty happy endings. They really like turn things around for themselves and like reconnect with family. Others not so much.
I'm really glad reality TV is a thing. I'm just really glad as a society we figured out that pretty early on. Just doing a lot of good.
I mean, what good is it to help people unless you exploit them at the same time?
Yeah, because I'm sure all those TV producers are really well suited to be like starting the therapy process or helping like get people connected with resources or something. Like you show up to a house and a woman has multi-generational sewage in water cooler bottles. Like you're not doing anything in this week. You're not making any ground here. Like at that point, I think your only hope is to like give her so many mushrooms that like she meets God and just hope that works. Like tie her to a stake in the yard, stuff like a fistful of mushrooms down her throat and just wait and see what happens.
They did condemn the house at
Yeah.
the end. So they got her into a different living situation. They condemned the house and like it's I mean, you could have condemned it for structural problems, but like I think they condemned it as a potential like cholera outbreak threat.
Yeah, but like again, what are you supposed to do? Because how's someone going to destroy that house without becoming violently ill? Like I'd want to wear a hazmat suit and then have a hazmat suit put around my bulldozer before I like started. And then you have a pile of like I just don't understand. What are you supposed to do? Napalm,
Dude,
fire,
it's
fire purifies.
you would be better off finding out that there was a meth lab in the house next door than finding out that it was that. You
Right.
know?
Well, I think the explosive capability is probably pretty similar.
Oh
Oh,
my god. So, I would let's go ahead and introduce big guest. Big guest. We've been waiting to release this episode.
we saved
If
all
you,
of our most poignant anecdotes for this intro.
it goes where it goes, and if Jennifer Knapp doesn't share this, we'll understand. Okay, so our guest this week is Christian music legend Jennifer Knapp. And if you grew up in church in that same era as us, you definitely listened to some Jennifer Knapp songs. She was kind of all over the place, did a ton of touring, was on all the Christian radio stations. In my opinion, that's just one of those names that corresponds with late '90s, early 2000s CCM culture, which is oh man, that's a terrible thing to say. But she's a really accomplished singer and songwriter. She's done a lot of other cool things in her life, and she made some waves in the late 2000s when she came out publicly. And there was, of course, a big Christian backlash to the news. And, you know, she's an interesting character because she's also maintained her faith ever since, she was a late teenager. So through all the struggles and all the backlash and stuff like that, she's remained a Christian in some sense of the word, and still views her Christian faith as very important to her. I'll tell you what, just talking to her, she's a very wise and well-spoken person. And she was able to put into words some like really interesting ideas that made you think. So I had a great time talking to her. One of those people that I'm like, wow, I can't believe that she responded to our email. So that's awesome. But yeah, you're going to really like this conversation. Uh, as always, if you like the podcast, leave us a review wherever you listen to it. We really appreciate those. Share it with friends. Share it with your mom. She'll enjoy it for sure. she can stop. She can take a day off from Alex Jones and listen to Grown Up Christian. And if you want to get in on the conversation, join our Discord. You can find a link to that in our Instagram bio. We got a link tree up there that'll take you to the Discord. But whether you want to come in and chat with everybody, or just kind of sit back and listen and see some of the stuff that people post, it's a fun place to be with some really cool people. And shout out to the Discord OGs that have been there for a long time. So that being said, enjoy our conversation with Jennifer Knapp. Hey everyone, we are back with our guest, singer-songwriter, missionary to Australia, and if I'm not mistaken, you also coined the term let go and let God. Jennifer Knapp.
I don't think I coined that term at all, but hey, nice to be here.
He has this
Recorded now.
Yeah. He has this tendency to try to make everyone feel uncomfortable as soon as we hit record.
Well, that worked, because I'm like, man, if I have any coined bumper sticker phrase about God, it's probably got expletives in it. And
Casey had one custom made. It just says "Let go, let God," and then says Jennifer Knapp underneath it. I don't know what he
Oh
was
my
trying to do with that,
Yeah.
but
Jennifer
I know
Knapp,
where you live
Michael
now,
Scott.
man.
you did tell her, at least by county, and you can easily narrow it down from there.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
Well-
thank you for joining us. We're so excited to talk to you. I feel like growing up in youth group and stuff, the generation that we did, you were kind of like on the Mount Rushmore of CCM.
Wow. I don't even know what to say to that. I mean, I definitely felt like I was like the odd man out while I was there. And I think, as time's gone on, the legend has improved, like has definitely grown. But I definitely understand though that there were, especially among youth groups at the time, which are, now that we're all aging and we're all grown up and adults now, but in particular for a lot of young people that, yeah, I was kind of on the on the playlist or on the mixtapes and stuff like that. But yeah, at the time I didn't really feel like I'd really made that much of a mark.
Yeah, I feel like even making a mark and what that looks like and how that probably feels as an artist has shifted so much since you started in the music industry compared to where the music industry is even at now. Not even just CCM, but the way it functions as a whole has made some major shifts. But we're like mid 30s shifting towards into the late 30s, and it's like everyone our age, it was like, oh yeah, Jennifer Knapp was a household name. So it is,
For better or
and
for worse.
for better. It started out good, and then you went and fucked it up. So I don't know. That's on you a little bit, and we'll get into that. But
What did the devil give you for your soul, Jennifer?
About $2.
turns out,
Got this Stacey Orico autograph.
Oh my gosh, you guys are hilarious.
so what's interesting is, I mean, podcast called Growing Up Christian. That's most people's stories that we connect with, but that's not yours. You didn't actually grow up in that world. So I'm curious as to like get into your shift into it and how you found that music industry and how you kind of found your way into that world as a whole. But obviously, I don't want to jump too far ahead. So
Well, I can definitely put my foot in my mouth right about this point. I mean, when like I didn't yeah, I like the experience that a lot of people have in the youth group thing. I didn't really have at all. I mean, I didn't have it all. I didn't start kind of hanging out with Christians. That sounds so weird. Until I was in college. So at my university, I was my freshman year. I just seemed to be surrounded by evangelical Christians. I mean, it felt like I was being swarmed. So here I was, I thought I mean, I look back and I'm like, I was just a pretty typical college kid, like drinking and screwing around, and I don't know, I was just me. And then all my friends were like, super Christian and were like kind of appalled by me, I think, to a degree. And but I was going through a really rough patch, and I don't know, eventually the short version is eventually I started kind of hanging out at what was on my campus, a really quite large at the time Fellowship of Christian Athletes group. So it was sort of like my halfway drug or a halfway house into kind of getting into the church life and stuff. And I really enjoyed it. And yeah, but by the time I became a Christian, because that was definitely something that, I mean, at least now I'm pretty uncomfortable with that language, like accepting Jesus Christ as my savior. It's not something
Mhm.
that I've ever really truly kind of, I think there's so much more to it than that phrase can say, that I think it's cheapened. The more I don't know, like now I would say over time that phrase sounds so cheap to what's been a really rich experience and a very deliberate choice. But I did, actively start participating in my faith community when I was around 19, 20 years old. Yeah, about 19 years old, my freshman year, by the end of my freshman year in college. And when I started, kind of getting a little bit more serious, it took me about a year of like wading in the waters a little bit before I could ever feel like I was comfortable enough to actually start going and hanging out with my friends kind of more directly with their church. And I will say that, like, that concept of growing up Christian for me, I mean, I was one of those people who came into it and just really experienced what a massive culture shock it was. I mean, for any of, and I don't wanna be really critical of it. I mean, we all kind of, our universes always feel like the universes they are, right? Until someday we realize that our world is so different from somebody else's.
Yeah, yeah.
But that bubble that a lot of my friends had lived in their whole lives. I mean, I had tons of Southern Baptist friends whose parents were Southern Baptist, and they grew, and they're from their entire youth, like Bible studies when they were 5 and 6 years old, to youth groups in junior high and high school. And I never even knew what a youth group was until I started playing concerts for them. So it was just such a wild experience to have to kind of learn like to understand that that was a culture in and of itself. And that's, I think to a degree, before we kind of go too far and make fun of it, I mean, we all have those kinds of circles that are really important and valuable to us in good ways and bad. And I think it took me a long time to kind of understand that and respect it. But yeah, I was like jumping full on into that. I really had no idea what kind of world that was, and how that had so significantly changed the lives of my, yeah, had affected the lives of my friends.
One of the things I'm always interested in is what that experience is, that shift is like for people. Did you have, was there any Christian background at all? Like, I'm sure it was adjacent. Like, it's not like you didn't know Christians or didn't rub shoulders with
Kansas.
them
Yeah.
before.
I mean, one of my favorite quotes is, I think it still lives on Wikipedia. It says, like, but somebody wrote in a magazine article once that I was raised irreligiously, and that just kind of had that always kind of stuck with me a little bit, like just like a poke. It felt like an evangelical poke a little bit, because I mean, I grew up in Kansas. I mean, culturally, and in the States, I mean, my grandmother was at church every weekend. She used to make me go to church. I went to the odd vacation Bible camp, or a VBS, or, one week of having to go to church every day or something like that, and making, tongue depressor Jesus puppets and things like that, you know what I mean?
I was
So
gonna
it wasn't
say
like I was
crafts.
unfamiliar with that. And even, I went to church a little bit, but my family wasn't, a Wednesday night, Sunday morning, truly religious kind of lot. Like, I had exposure to it, and I was interested, and I knew enough about Christianity that I wouldn't have made, I don't know, I guess the way I felt growing up is it would have been like a step too far to say, "Oh, I'm an atheist and I don't believe in God." I think just in general, everyone around me had some kind of reference to and did believe in God. And I think particularly because, if you have an understanding about about the US anyway, if you're white, Midwestern, odds are you've got some pretty good cultural experience with Christianity. That's just the language base. It's not like you grow up, Muslim, or there are a few Catholics around, but by the time I ran
Might
into
as well have been an
the event.
atheist.
Yeah, but by the time I ran to evangelicals, like, those were the Christian crazies. I mean, this was like a whole other level, like all day, every day, 24 hours a day, trying to make an identity out of this that was, a language in and of itself and recognizable, in and every day was just a new concept to me.
Yeah, I think what that's a huge part of making it a language, and so when you started hanging out with people who were Christians, and you started being pulled in that direction. So obviously, you in and out, random experiences with church here and there, and it was part of some people's uh, in your family that was part of their tradition. But like, was there something? Because I grew up in it. Like I never had a time in my life where I wasn't in it. We were non-denominational, might as well have been Southern Baptist in theology, and maybe just like a little less uptight with like the clothes you wore to church or something like that. But it was like it, and I remember bringing friends, like, because what's interesting is that they got you because I was always told if I hung out with people who weren't Christian, the idea was that they would hopefully become Christian, and it didn't work for any of my friends. So I don't know where I went wrong, but you would bring them in high school. They were like, yeah, that was kind of weird. Like I haven't really done anything like that. And uh, there were certain things that stuck out to them as very peculiar. And maybe they'd gone to a Catholic church before, but that was probably the end of their religious experience. When you started hanging around with Christians and they started inviting you to church things, was there anything that was like a real wall? You're like, oh wow, that's very unique. Something that kind of
That's
like shocked you,
bizarre that young adults are
that
doing
Here,
this.
eventually became normal. Yeah, Casey, your mic is a little something's. Sorry, Jennifer. Casey, something's up with your mic a little bit. You're not coming through all the time. I don't know if you just need to get closer to it, but
Oh,
Casey or
could be.
me?
Casey,
Okay, good,
yeah,
because
All
I'm
right.
perfect.
I'll work on it. Sorry about that.
Yeah, for me, what shocked me the most, I think on the spiritual side of it, like on the possibility of God and just the general notion of just the invitation of God, I was pretty comfortable with. I think the things that kind of freaked me out, I think where I would maybe categorize into 2 things is one, like, I did have a fair few Pentecostal friends, so I had a genuine freak out. I would say maybe discomfort, but it was just really hard for me to get my head around kind of the spirit life, speaking in tongues, kind of healing, laying on hands kind of things, like this real manifest, this idea that God could manifest in some ways that we could see through, these kind of really chaotic spirit things. That was one that was really intriguing, but really just frightening, I think, was probably the strongest feeling that I had, 'cause it seemed unrestrained, I think, a little bit, and to degree kind of leans into the second category that I felt all the way across the board in most of my, other things, was, like, just this intense level of judgment that came with, like, the kind of the moral concept. So, I mean, the level of which people talked about sin, and all of a sudden in this Christian life that there was this idea that you could irrevocably be unloved by God was just such a foreign concept to me from even I think it offended the basis of which I even began. I mean, I think what really drew me to the faith was this. I didn't really care too much about the facts at the time. I could understand metaphorically what it meant, even that God, this supreme being, there was this possibility available to all of us to be able to see ourselves as people with dignity, lovable by God, and if the supreme being in some way could orchestrate this entire universe and our humanity in a way that could look through our worst possible day and say, this is somebody that I care for. That still forever reaches out and longs to know you and love you. I thought that was just profoundly, and to this day, I find that just even the concept of that possibility, just the possibility alone,
Yeah.
just worth a thread that I'm willing to tug on. And so kind of getting back to the shame and the judgment phase, I mean, it was just such very quick turnaround. Like for me, one of the things that made me collapse into and actually, for lack of a better word, kind of surrender or just kind of open myself up to Christianity was this idea that God, despite everything that I could ever name, do, think, no matter how bad things got, I somehow trusted that God could still somehow love me. And then about a year into it, and when I started actually really participating in faith community, I mean, this is a really trivial thing, but at the time, it really broke my spirit a bit. Sorry, just it really hurt my feelings and really made me scared of my community. And I'd been going to church on a regular basis, and I walked out of church one day and I'm standing on the steps and I lit a cigarette and I was, because it'd been 2 hours since I'd had a smoke. So I walk out the door, light up a cigarette, and they're like, "Oh, you're ruining the temple of the Holy Spirit. You're ruining your temple." And it was like this judgment. And all of a sudden, so the people around me started saying, "These are some things you have to put away now. You can't cuss anymore. You can't smoke anymore." Of course, I'd already well understood how they felt about sex and things like that, but it just seemed it wasn't. I mean, it's trivial. I don't think those things one way or the other necessarily qualify us, but that kind of language and that kind of response to people who in any weren't teetotaling white, pure as the driven snow. And like this was this idea that we were also supposed to somehow be something like that, just seemed, one, impossible, and two, not the premise that I thought, you know, it's strange because on one hand I was like, no, I'm not here because I want to take advantage of, God's good graces, but I also don't want to feel like, I also was very uncomfortable with the idea that it felt like a bait, basically like a bait and switch. Come as you are, especially like that evangelical concept of a kind of like that Christ is bridging the gap between us and God and kind of laying down across this chasm for us to connect, allow us to be able to connect to God. And while theologically, I can have a whole conversation about what I think about that, but I did
The
kind of get the
picture. I
sense,
remember the picture.
yeah, the picture, and like there's this valley and there's this cross laying across it. And Jesus is walking across the cross, and you're supposed to walk across the chasm with Jesus over the cross. And I mean, at least in the picture, I somewhat metaphorically understood something about that, and even something about the peace and the tenderness of which I think when I actually read the Bible, and I spent a lot of time doing that. I mean, I became a Bible junkie. I was a hardcore disciple in that regard. And I'm sitting here, I'm reading these texts, and I'm spending time kind of really meditating slash praying on them. And then I would get that affirmation of that God was really way more concerned about getting, about relationship and peaceable life as opposed to splitting hairs about what I did or did not do that day in terms of, just these things that we fight battles over so much and kick people out of church or excommunicate. I mean, I think there is a point for when we're doing harm to others. And I started to get this idea of, yeah, that was kind of really what really surprised me, I think, the most was just this freedom with which people kind of acted out this performative faith wildly, and then this other side of it that was so judgmental against those who didn't. And it was heartbreaking because
Yeah.
it took every all the hope that I had about just my goodness and my ability and my personhood able to be loved and seen by God in a community who didn't want to see me unless I showed up in a certain kind of way. And it was something I was able to persist through, I think, and even to this day. But it's definitely shaped the music that I did. It shaped the way that I interacted with people, and I think to a degree even and I'm kind of, I don't know if I'd say I'm proud of it, but I'll stand by the the 30 some odd years that experience of feeling that culture shock and understanding what it was, I never got over that feeling of what it felt like to be an outsider in that bubble, and a, a story that I felt like I've been able to talk to my community, if I can still call it my community, to say, listen, if you've never lived outside the bubble, please listen to those of us who have been to tell you how you're reading and how this room reads to others when you give us an invitation to it, to make it friendly to really all the people who you're inviting to come. I mean, hospitality is hospitality at the end of the day, and it's really hard to invite somebody and then criticize them for how they dressed when they show up. I mean, at a certain point, if you want to feed somebody and love on somebody, then do that. Start
I
there.
feel like the preoccupation with like optic, because it's really like there's all sorts of sins, but there are some that have like more visible optics than others. And what you said about like knowing how this looks to someone who's not a part of the community and is like looking to join and stuff. So we recently talked to a person that is still a pretty devout conservative evangelical, and we were talking about growing up and stuff, and this person had grown up in the church start to finish, and I we asked her if she had ever experienced like a time period where she dealt with uncertainty, or she kind of like found herself wandering away from the principles and stuff like that, and pretty resoundingly said, no, I've never had like a backslidden phase. I've never you know doubted my faith and stuff like that. And I was just thinking, like, it's so clear to people who are on the outside, like, no one thinks that you're this devout, like, and it would be more relatable, it would make more sense, and it would be more valuable for you to acknowledge your humanity to the people who are on the outside looking in, and say like, yeah, I've been tested, and I don't, I've been uncertain at times. Like, it doesn't inspire confidence, and it doesn't make you feel like you're in a transparent, honest environment when somebody's like, I've never doubted for a second, and you shouldn't
Yeah.
either. you know
It always freaks people out when, like, I mean, I answer questions for a living, right? So it's kind of funny, like, but when somebody who kind of isn't that familiar with, like the years of dialogue that I've had in and around faith, like, but every once in a while, still somebody asks me like, "Well, do you believe in God?" And I'll go, and I usually answer like on the day. I'm like, "Well, today not so much," like, or, like, I remember, like, one of the first times I ever said that out loud and, while I was working inside of CCM, like, "Not today, I don't." It's like, it would freak people, it just absolutely freaked people out, that level of, I don't know, like, I had faith, but I don't always see God, and I don't always understand it. It's still something that I just it's a weird kind of concept to me to think that there's any level of certainty in any of the things that we're doing, except, I mean, I don't know, there's a consistency. I think I can, even after years of this experience, understand that kindness and compassion and grace are principles that, I don't know, like, in a Christian, if you're like super, evangelical, you might say those things all come from God. And some days I'm really comfortable in saying that. And the other days I don't know that I can necessarily make that as a religious claim, but I'm still happy to engage them. Like, those are the things of which I think, if those things are ever true, or if those things bring goodness or joy or grace, I mean, they do that.
Yeah.
And they'll stand the test of time, and they have stood the test of time. And so the particularity, I think, whether or not God gets the credit for that or not, I think God, if God is the supreme ultimate deity in that way at all, whether I give God the credit for that or not is not going to dent God's ego. Like, you know, that those good, and I think I mean, that's even true in a human sense, like if I love you, I love you. And if you don't always see it, that's fine. I'll keep going, I'm not gonna like give up on like, well, you don't see my love. Well, then screw you. Fuck it. I'm not gonna
Yeah.
I'm not gonna love on you anymore. I'm not gonna get you a Christmas present this year because you didn't say it enough times. I don't It's just the things that we genuinely hold and value and care for in our lives and that we truly see and know, we tend to value those things and tend to repeat over and over again, with levels of great endurance, the kinds of compassion that we're willing to put in that direction. And I haven't seen very many people fail that. And for me, whether or not that's you or me or anything, I give that a quality that's holy, with a capital H. And whatever religion or whatever words that we use to talk about that, I mean, maybe this is the creative person in me that I'm willing to be imaginative and free with my language to get at the best language possible at the time to be able to talk about it.
Yeah, I love that, and the result well, you're talking about the results of those actions, it's like and when you're talking about the bad examples of that, where it's like, well, you're not gonna if you just stop loving somebody because they slighted your ego, then it's like e everyone has gone through feelings of like, "That person hurt me, I don't know if I care about in the same way anymore," but everyone on the outside of those situations looks in and goes, "That's definitely a flawed version of love." Like, regardless of who they're attributing these, like, if esoteric concepts to, it's like they're agreed upon and we can see them and the results we can see them yield results, and even like whether you're talking about like how like unconditional positive regard in therapy uh makes an
Right.
impact on an individual in a positive way, or an unconditional positive regard, which you don't necessarily get in evangelical circles to the same degree, hence the criticism of you smoking and the fear of bad optics. And I imagine even still the optics. Like, so growing up listening to music, that was always a thing. You're at a music festival, and so was seen smoking a cigarette from this band or that, and it's just like that's what people talk about. And then you're having friends conversation with your friends about whether or not it's okay to swear around other people, or even in your own little circle. It's like you waste all this time talking about things that are always related to optics because you're worried about how it's going to impact your witness, which is supposed to be the most important thing of
Right.
all. And then you're like, the irony being like that there's nothing more to this than optics, or that bad optics based on one person's perception is enough to dead the
Yeah.
entire thing, which they seem to really believe can transcend all of that, which is what brought you there in the first place. So they kind of create a paradox, and then get mad at people when they recognize that the logical failure there, and start looking elsewhere for answers that might not be so neat, and that aren't going to require them to be somewhere where they're not, in order to continue to maintain in a space that originally made them feel welcome.
Yeah, and I don't want to take anything away from the fact that, I mean, it is important that we present ourselves as we hope to work toward. And what I mean by that is, if we're trying to put things away and we're trying to, I think we're all trying to dress the part that we want, right? To practice the parts that we want, to do not just say something, but to actually visibly do it. And sometimes to make a habit of something, you have to put on something that's new and doesn't quite fit you maybe the first couple of times or whatever. But there is a difference between just simply doing it for the sake of the performative reason, right? Just like, you guys have been using the word optics. Just for the look of it doesn't make you a loving, kind person if you act loving and kind. At some point in time, and at the same time, there's the rehearsal. Like, I'm going to do this now because I've never done this before, and this is what I'm told loving kindness is. And at a certain point, hopefully when we're learning, we're starting to almost get it. It's not only just a habit that we do, but it's actually something that we see and that we know how to do. And it's very difficult. I mean, that's about the best I can explain that now. And I'm sure there's some big academic word for it or something. But I think we get this kind of polarized thing. You're either in or you're out. You're either, hot. You be either hot or cold, but don't be lukewarm. I mean, I think we get so particular about certainty. We get so particular about what is or isn't a sin that we forget that sometimes we need the spaces to practice. We need the spaces to fail. We need the the permission to try stuff on to a degree to see whether or not something's beneficial. At the same time, like if we're going to experiment with something and see whether or not something is or isn't good for us, to actually be able to be honest with ourselves, be honest with the results of that, be, um, I don't want to say judgmental, but discerning about what actions that we are doing. So, I mean, would I say smoking was good for me? No, it was terrible for me and my person and my body and for people around me. So, okay, yeah, I could put that away. But as an example of that, one of the things that happened for me at the time was like, I mean, it was in a substance, so it wasn't, here I was, on nicotine basically, and so to just drop nicotine overnight like it was going to be some miracle just didn't happen that easy for me. So what I started doing was lying to my friends about whether or not I was smoking. And I started, never smoking around my Christian friends and going around the corner. And then I felt, like I was a liar because I
Yeah.
didn't feel free to talk to my friends going, I'm still smoking and I don't basically like it took me I needed to want to quit smoking. And it would take me years to do that. But here, one time, and I picked it up again when I was on tour and toward the end of my Christian music days. And I remember one day somebody had come out and I was standing out behind the bus and this kid was like filming me while I was smoking a cigarette. And I was like freaking out because I'm like, geez, like this is like it was about the time where stuff could have gone up on the internet, not quite yet, but it's just like, dude, I don't want you taking photos of me while I'm smoking. I'm like, I don't I'm standing behind the bus in the dark. Like, what
Yeah.
gave
Don't
you
be a
the idea?
creep.
Like, it was a violation of my privacy for one.
Yeah.
And then, on the other hand of it, it's just like I knew the way that it would look, but I just didn't really want to be photographed that way anyway. And I don't know. I just hated that feeling. I hated that feeling that I wasn't willing. Like, what bothered me more was that it was gonna create problem that a particular photo like that was gonna create more problems for my job than I cared about this kid seeing me smoking, and that's what bugged me. It's just like, it wasn't that this I what I would have preferred now to have shown that person is that I was comfortable with who I was and what I was and enough to like not get mad at the kid over that, like, but that, I don't know. It was, I just, I think it's interesting that we get hung up on some things rather than actually going, no, what I actually care about is your body. Like, I care about, I want you to live forever. I want you not forever, but I want you to be happy and healthy. And this thing's a carcinogenic drug that is going to like deplete your system. Please don't do that, or what can I do to help? Or have you ever thought about quitting? Or here's some Nicorette gum or whatever. The idea that I was having a moral failure by having a cigarette, I think, and that there was something wrong with my faith and that something wrong with my character and my person was like a step too far. And I think that's probably more of the point is that, when we start kind of defining, I think and this was kind of one of my things earlier on in that space of a conversation about judgment is what we're kind of talking about is like on one hand we want to be able in a perfect world I suppose or in a religious world we like to define those things that we can and can't do because it helps identify us right to other people but and in particular what is sin and what isn't sin because it's not just easy to well you'll know it when you see it like no, it's, I think sins are when we harm ourselves, when we harm others, but sometimes we can do why can somebody do one thing and that's not really harming anyone? And why can somebody do the same thing over here and it's harming everyone? I think there are some things that we that that can more often than not be a danger to us, ourselves, and others. But in a larger sense of it, I was like, a glass of wine at my dinner is no reason to write off my entire career, or the fact that I, dropped my guitars down a flight of stairs and yelled "fuck" is, I think, incredibly understandable
The appropriate response,
reaction.
I would say.
But
You're
I don't know.
contaminating kids.
But, say, I use the same word in, like, drop kicking somebody's head and doing that, we've got a problem, and I think we spend a lot of time fighting a battle about what we look like, rather than understanding something about the journey that people are experiencing. How do we help them? How do we walk alongside with them? And, when is it appropriate for us to intercede and when is it not, when we start talking about what one person is doing to help shape their lives. If I come up to you and say, "Hey, I'm really trying to put this thing away. What does that look like?" Or I'm trying to learn something new. I saw that I was, maybe not being as kind to other people, or I wasn't kind to you, and trying, actually genuinely trying to learn from that behavior and trying to become a whole well-rounded person, I think is in the long run what I've spent my I think has been one of the gifts of Christianity. It's been really good for me in my life. I've I mean, I think that's opened me up to the concept of what do I need to do in my own person and in my own outlook toward myself, my own treatment of myself, the treatment that I have of others, not just to do a thing that seems like it's kind, but actually genuinely look at the person across from me and understand the kindness that they deserve. To look
Yeah,
at their value, their goodness, and their
I
worth,
love that.
and then act in accordance to that. Because when I start opening up when I start looking at other people across from me and starting to see them as people worthy of dignity, worthy of love, worthy of kindness, worthy of, I'm not worthy even, but just in and of themselves, a human being who will not only, like, you know, is an opportunity for me to see something beautiful and wonderful, but also a person that I can gift to, and who I can participate and water and encourage to flower and be fruitful, not just for themselves, but for other people as well. And to be, I don't know, to just recognize that and act in with gratitude. And I mean, that's, to me at the end of the day, like, was one of the most amazing things. It's like, and that shifted the way that I thought about it too. I mean, I think even when I first became a Christian, that was this kind of performative concept that I struggled with, going, "Oh, well, I can act nice to everybody, but I was still a bitch." Like, I really was. And even in CCM, like I think there was some days like that. I was like, "Oh, like one of my friends said, "Oh, she seems like a nice person. Too bad she doesn't like people." Was what somebody said about me one time, and I heard that and was like, "Oh my god, like, what's going on that somebody's thinking that I don't actually enjoy where I'm at?" And what's because to me, that's my work to do, and not just to smile and say, "Oh, I love you." It's the equivalent, that Southern equivalent of saying, "Bless your heart," you know? I don't wanna just I don't want you to just hear the words come out of my mouth. I want you to feel it, and I want you to be able to trust in the relationships that I'm willing to build with you. And to me, that's something that I feel like my faith has been able to taught me. And I feel like that's, if God is able to communicate, that would be the thing I would hope we're trying to understand, is not that God isn't just something that we're seeking to even be loved by, but that God is in fact loving of us, so we don't have to kind of fight that war anymore, and then just be able to see the beauty that's available to us and opening the door up to the possibility of that relationship.
Yeah, I love all of that. I think that's all fantastic. When you so you're in when you're in college, obviously the experience you had, despite there being some complications, and s- some things that made it difficult to maybe be yourself in that environment, you ultimately did stay in it and you found your way into the Christian music world. What was the shift into that? Obviously you're a musician for a while before you started
It was actually
magically
pretty fast though,
playing
believe
show.
it or
Was it
not.
really?
Yeah, I mean, I think I became a Christian when I was a freshman in college. I think my sophomore year was, I would say, like, my church year, and end of that, I think by 94 I had joined I got asked to be in a Christian band. I was playing like praise and worship in my local FCA group, started playing like helping out in the music and worship services at my church as well. But it wasn't I mean I was a barely I would say it was generous to say I was a modestly good guitar player. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I kind of enjoyed playing in the quote unquote praise band because it's like three chords, over and over and over again. And I kind of got my guitar chops up, but I didn't start songwriting until maybe my sophomore year of college or something. And within a year of that, I'd been in a band and started doing solo shows and got signed, I think around 95 or 96. So
Very
it was
Jeez.
fast.
like, yeah, it was within a couple of years of becoming a Christian. I had what would have been at least in my indie career had been established at that point.
So God
Even though
blessed
I had
you
no
big
idea.
time, is what you're saying.
What's that?
God
God
blessed
blessed
you.
me. Well, yeah, I guess. um, the good side of that was though that I was traveling so much that I mean there were some really good sides of that. I think music gave me the opportunity to see a lot of other church communities outside of, the one that I had in my hometown. And, I was hanging out with, Presbyterians one weekend, Lutherans the next, Catholics occasionally. And, I was like, oh, like, I mean, I think those experiences, especially early on, were helpful for me to kind of go, oh, these are just the foibles of my community. Like you're not gonna love everything about everybody all the time, but for the most part, it was pretty, I just had an understanding that there were, I called them like at the time I remember thinking, oh, those are California Christians, like because of California and the Napa Valley. I mean, California Christians, even the evangelical ones would be having wine with lunch or something like that, or you might hear the occasional expletive. They're a little bit more conservative now out there in Orange County than they used to be, but I just really appreciated and I appreciated going to the Northeast and where there was a lot more mainline traditions like Methodists and Presbyterians that weren't, like the Southern Baptist flavor you get kind of around the Bible Belt and so on. So, and I had to figure out even as a musician, I think in those environments, a way to be flexible inside of that. Like to have to go from one community to the next, to the next, to the next. I had to have my listening ears on and I had to appreciate that I was a guest in those spaces.
Yeah.
I felt like there were gifts of insight to their experience that I didn't always know or see, I think, especially early on in the piece. So, I mean, it's kind of the weird thing where I think I had an opportunity, I would say, that a lot of my Christian peers didn't have, particularly if your family's tied to a tradition, that, I've had to work in and around a lot of different Christianities and ways of expressing that and different missions depending on which church you go to. What are the really important things to this community? Some people are service to the community, some people are about evangelicalism to the community, some people are about the Bible and hardcore, and some people, it just depends on where you go, what that community's interest is. What's just difficult is sometimes in some of those communities, all they see is their own bubble, and I think that's the thing. As I've traveled over time to say, well, I know that that's what it's feeling like here, but I'll go over here tomorrow, and there's a gift that these guys gave me, and I might be able to share that a little bit to across communities, so to speak. So I've appreciated that through the years, but I'm not I'm really grateful that the fast rise up into Christian music actually was so quick because it just didn't let me pick or even get bogged down in one space. I had to
Yeah.
really figure out a way to navigate one on my own and feel like I could carry this with me, even if I didn't have if I wasn't going to be home to back to my home church for 3, 4, 6 weeks, or maybe 6 months or longer. I had to figure out how to mature and carry my faith with me, even if I wasn't being helped out at the time, and I also had to figure out a way to appreciate and not disparage the different communities, even if I didn't even agree or didn't even want to, even if I mean, I played at tons of Pentecostal churches, which I wasn't my favorite thing to do. mostly because it required the laying on of hands and a lot more permissions and authorities that I didn't always feel comfortable with. So I tended to avoid those after a while, but I even try to value that because I mean there are incredible people inside of those spaces, and for as much as any one environment might make us uncomfortable or be a little bit strange or weird to us, um, trying to find what's common that we're sharing is one of the beautiful things and challenges. I think I've been given the opportunity to have to try and navigate.
Well, that's a very gracious way of saying that you had to deal with a lot of weirdos.
I mean,
What
I've
was
had
there
some
some
weird
weird
days. I
things
got to
that
tell you,
happened?
I've had some
What
weird days. Yeah, for sure.
any of them stand out, like, any funny stories from that time period?
Oh, I mean, more than one occasion. I mean, I just being a musician, going in those environments. I've had a lot of people like kind of put you on the spot and want to lay hands on you in the middle of the room, prophesy over you,
Oh, those are always fun.
those kinds of things. I've had a couple people try and like get me slain in the Holy Spirit while I was working, which is kind of weird. Uh, Like, I don't know. I mean, there those kinds of things that happen, and it's really interesting in those kind of things because, like, do y you know, do you, like, not is that a gift that somebody's trying to gi and I think that's where here, I'm already answering my question. I mean, I think sometimes that the parts of me that allowed that to happen around me, and when I let those when I didn't actually wanna participate in something like that, they felt like a violation, right? When people aren't getting the social cues and they wanna do that anyway is really, like, it can be very physically violating, right? To have somebody particularly as a woman in a church who I don't know anybody around me, and here's a man in front of everybody else wanting to lay his hands on me, and I'm like, wait a second, consent, consent, hashtag me too slash Jesus, like, please don't, isn't you know people see in those environments can be abusive, right? Because if you don't accept that, you're not accepting God. You're denying the work of the Spirit, and at any point, and you know, from times that was a negative experience and where I was shamed for saying no and resist, quote, really genuinely not wanting to do that. And then running into having other experiences with other people in that environment going, hey, if you're okay, I'd love to pray with you right now. And I mean, one of the greatest moves in my whole life. It probably took me close to 15 years to get to this point. Maybe didn't even happen till career 2.0 when I came back in 2010 and started kind of like getting back into a couple of churches now and again. But I remember like not long ago, somebody was like, I would really love to pray with you right now. Is that okay? And I was like, here's what we can do. I really appreciate, I would say, I really appreciate your prayers, but I would like, I will accept them and I'm open to them, but you go over there and do that or do that somehow, but I'm not going to do that with you. Like, because so many people had taken advantage of me to use that as an excuse to literally touch me, to be intimate with me in some way. I mean, some really creepy ways in a back
Yeah, I can see
alley
that. That's so
to
wild.
kind of use that as an excuse, right? To literally make physical contact with me. And so I was just like, no, if that's something you genuinely, right? If I want to genuinely give you something, I can give that to you in some ways that don't violate you. And if you don't want to do that, that's cool. That's fine. I can still a prayer, when we say, I want to pray for you, uh, uh, you can express that other ways to people. Like, you don't have to stop them and put your hand on their forehead and push them down to the ground. You can
Yeah.
you can genuinely, like there's even scripture that says if you're going to pray, pray in your closet. Like, you don't have to pray out loud and do that. I mean, you can send out and wish for and hope for and, you know, imagine a spirit of benevolence moving towards someone else without ever having to even say a word to somebody else. And that or let somebody know in a word of kindness that you're caring about them and thinking about them. It doesn't require kind of these insidious, weird things. I think the more that we genuinely speak to people, it actually has a lot more purchase than it does to say something Jesus-y over the top of them. But yeah, I mean, there are all kinds of weird things that have happened like that. I mean, I've definitely been like, yeah, so many hands have been laid upon me. I can't even say. But even some just like really freaky moments where I've had, you know, people just, I think, yeah, just mostly just people trying to come up and insinuate themselves into my space and into my life because Jesus told them they had to be there.
Yeah, yeah,
And
there it
it's just
is.
kind of weird stuff.
It's
I don't wanna
that's the
point
st
anybody out, but I mean,
yeah.
there's some borderline criminal cases that are still probably pending somewhere, so I don't wanna get too
Oh
far
my
into
god.
Wow. That rough, huh?
I mean, I've
It's
had yeah, I mean, and it's like, it's a very serious thing, and I think in particular yeah, I think in particular, like, the levels of intimacies that can be violated and the idea of making contact, in the name of God is just one of the grossest, most horrible
yeah.
things, and it just almost happened on a regular basis,
Yeah, and we see
s
that
when
go
I was
So
wrong
working.
throughout
strange.
Christianity in a lot of different places.
Yeah.
Well, it's even
We're
like
Not
you
that.
just
know, we're
Christian, but religion. We see that. We see that.
Yeah, where any concept of no or anybody saying no to a moment or a time or to anything as being a denial of God or the Holy Spirit is just
Yes.
a profoundly a horrible thing to not listen to.
But even that, like people use like social pressures to do that with people. Like, you remember that whole deal with Taylor Swift, where that there was like that DJ in Denver or something like that they were taking a picture together, and he like put his hand up her skirt or something like that. She ended up suing him, and then, well, he sued her, and then she countersued him and won and stuff. But it just like bizarre that somebody take those would do something like that, especially in public, in front of a camera. I mean, some of these people I think just have no bounds, and I think that's part of what excites them about it. I guess I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, yeah, it's hard to tell. But I mean, I think at the end of the day for me that one of the tests of that is like genuinely kind people aren't going to push anything on you, you know? And I think even to a degree, we talk about like the differences of culture. Like, in that bubble, you invite somebody new into that space. Imagine giving any new friend in an environment permission to not have to do anything. Like you don't have, I've had many people, I go to these environments a lot where I am, y- I've gone to just wildly different religious traditions and experiences, and I've had other people come with me. I'm like, "Okay, you don't have to feel like you have to pray. You don't even have to come sit up the front. I'm gonna go do this stuff if you feel comfortable in the back or something like that, but you don't have to do anything here today that you don't wanna do. Just sit down quietly, if everybody stands up and you wanna sit down, you don't have to move. Like, you do and be and live in this space however you want." Um, and I think it's really important that, if you are somebody in that environment that can understand that what you decide to do in your sanctuary and that is normal for you to do, if you're inviting somebody else into that space to give them permission to say, "Hey, you can do this however you want." I think communion's a really interesting example, like, and I've seen that more over the last couple of decades where I'm going to point out a pastor friend of mine, Mark Tidd, who I think has since retired, but is a former pastor of Highlands Highlands Park Church in Denver, Colorado, and they had to kind of retool their entire liturgy and had it was an open and affirming church, had a lot of people who were at that church who had experienced trauma from other faith communities. And whenever they came to the communion or the Eucharist, depending on what tradition you're at, or the Lord's Supper, all the names for it. They said, "Listen, everybody's welcome." It was just this really normal language about talking about what was going to happen, how it could happen, and you could come up if you wanted to. If you didn't want to come up, it's okay. Like, you don't owe anything. And even people within that congregation sometimes just didn't even, like they weren't feeling it, or they didn't want to necessarily go up to the front and walk up and take communion or whatever. So saying out loud, I think, particularly in environments that have had, I think communities who have been open to the kinds of trauma that their community has experienced know very well and are conscious of the traditions and the rites and rituals that we do that can make other people feel uncomfortable, maybe on the ritual itself or their lack of familiarity with it, but the willingness to understand that this is something that we're choosing to do and has an evocative experience for us and acknowledges that in some way that when you can communicate that about something that you're doing that looks weird to somebody else, that lets them understand that you're not nuts. Like, I'm doing this because it's, like, even when I've talked about, like, one of my favorite times of year that I usually do tend to gravitate to church is around Easter time because the the Easter Sunday and that the Lenten season basically is kind of like one of more and more contemplative seasons of the year on the calendar as far as the religious schedule is concerned. And so I like to take that time. It really means a lot to me. And I usually look to go to a church around Easter to have communion. And when I do that, I remember when I was first talking to my wife about it, who's not particularly religious. She's like, "Why do you want to do that every year?" And I was like, I think she was a little bit nervous that I was like really wanted to go eat the body of Christ and the blood of Jesus, And I was like, no, I said that it's just the ritual of it. It makes sense to me. It's comforting to me. It's poetic. I love the metaphor of it. And even if I'm not really feeling it, she's like, well, do you want to be back in that world again? I'm like, sometimes yeah, and sometimes no. But I said, this is a thing that means something to me whenever it's sacred when I do it. I feel contemplative when I do it. I feel like this is a mystical thing and an action and one of the few of the ones that I can do that makes sense to me and is something that I can only kind of do I need to do in that space. I've done communion on hillsides and had people come to my house and do it but it's in the sanctuary for me that has the most value and I like being able to go to that place and do that. And when I was able to talk about that, it took the mystery away from it. For my partner, no longer thought I was just trying to do some Christian crazy thing, but that it was, it's like you like to go out and watch the sunset on sometimes. It's the same thing. It just gives you the sense of calm and peace. And you want to take time to see the beauty in the world. And this is one of the things that I do that with. And I was like, I can explain the theology of it to you, but no, I'm not going to do that. It's a meaningful ritual for me to do and it has value to me. And when you can talk about it in those terms to somebody else who is where that thing is alien to them, I think says something about the value that you hold for it than just saying, the repeating the phrases that make it seem a lot more important and sacred than it is. Like, tell me in your words why this is important and tell me why this is sacred to you. And I will probably believe it more than if you quote your pastor.
Yeah, yeah. So, to get into a little bit of the, yeah, obviously, so yeah, very fast into the Christian music industry. It's funny because I think of like some of the, you uh, Casey and I were big in like the metal and hardcore world. So we watched a lot of those bands start out in like in their local scene, and they would basically fail out of college, not go to college, maybe fail a senior year of high school because they were just hit the road in a shitty car, and it's like did that forever, and then find so they by the time things started taking off, they're like, yeah, now we're actually having tours that aren't terrible and don't suck as bad as all the other ones we've done. So you go from doing like getting involved in music and then getting signed in a relatively short period of time, and now you're going everywhere. And then after a little while, you're like, now I'm just going to blow this whole thing up. What were some of the what were like the reasons
Yeah.
for like was it touring? Was it the pressure of coming out in that world just felt like not,
You
there's
had an
so many things
N64
that
on your tour bus. I mean,
What's
hey.
what'd you say on my tour bus?
I saw a video of you earlier today where you were talking about living on a tour bus, and you said you had a N64 and played GoldenEye on there.
Oh my god, yes, it's true.
How bad could it be?
Oh. It's I loved it. I mean, it was good. I mean, I really did enjoy it. It is something to be sharing a tour bus with 6 other dudes for 300 days a year. It's not quite that bad, but I mean, yeah, I think my
300.
CC Yeah, well, yeah, probably wasn't that much. I would usually have like 6 to 8 weeks off a year, I think, that wasn't, was maybe at home, but I didn't even know what home was. It was just like, oh, another weird hotel room. But I mean, I think my CCM career, I mean, if you count like my indie years and getting started in 94, and then I did my last Christian date in September of 2002. Um, I only did 3 records in it, like 30 songs is pretty much the bulk of my CCM catalog, and I did a couple of special things in throughout there, but it's a short career really for as much as I talk about it. Um, but kind of what really kind of blew it up and what really caused me to kind of walk away were a couple of things. One was just the general fatigue of just working that much. I mean, to
Sure.
say that I genuinely was on the road for what felt like a solid 2 years and didn't have a lot of I didn't have a lot of safety in terms of, like, personal relationships and, like, a nurturing environment outside of that. I mean, it was just all life on the road and all eyes concerned about what my Christian optics were, and I had no life. Um, no kind of normal life that I knew how to build because 'cause I'd been in the sense that, you know, I think in a Christian context where this idea that, you're always supposed to be this, like and I think I guess maybe as a I don't wanna say a celebrity, but because that was my job, every waking minute of my life was about that optic. Everybody was always reminding me about how much they had to lose, how much I had to lose, what my responsibility was every day I'm being this quote unquote Christian role model. Um, and not that I had like this secret life or anything, I just didn't have a life. As an example, I'd spent 10 years celibate. So after I became a Christian, I basically shut the whole works down. Like I didn't date guys because people thought I was shagging guy. If I had an intimate relationship with a male friend, like for whatever reason, right? Like just a good guy who like a man in my life that was my friend. If I got too close to him or we hugged too long, people thought we were sleeping together. If I had a girlfriend that was the same way, somebody was my confidant, like somebody you saw me around that was like an intimate relationship, right? You hugged or you could tell had a really good relationship. Oh, I was sleeping with that person. So I just, and that was pretty early on in my career where I realized that everybody thought I was sleeping with everybody else. And I was just like, oh, so I shut that down and I didn't really have any good friends like in my private life that I could just go, man, this tour sucks, or these people are driving me crazy, or I don't think I want to be here anymore, all that kind of stuff. I didn't have any of those relationships that I really trusted. So that was one factor for, 5 or 6 years of not really actually having some like just normal, everyday, grounded relationships that I knew were on my side, just like a friend. I just
Yeah.
didn't really have any real friends, which sounds really sad.
Yeah,
Um,
it sounds like a rough couple of years to go not
yeah,
no real friends and constantly on the move, waking up in a new
yeah,
city every day. That's a lot.
yeah.
And you had to resort to eating cigarettes instead of smoking them.
Yeah, right? Well, and then I think so that was part of it, as I was lonely, I think to a degree, and just fatigued from not yeah, I think we all go to work and then we come home, we put our sweatpants on, you know what I mean? And I just had no place in the world where I could go put my sweatpants on. And then the other side of it too is I think by the time I quit in 2002, see, I would have been like 26, 27. I'd been a Christian for about, 10 years or so. And late 20s, I was developing my theology. I mean, the things that I really genuinely thought about my faith and the things that I wanted to say, I was maturing as a person. Um, and I was finding that, I wanted to be able to put those things into my art, and when I started kinda sneaking them into my art and wanted to talk about certain things, I'd get some pushback, and, um, so, and I didn't quite I think I was just genuinely terrified that I was getting to the point where theologically, I was gonna blow up my own career anyway because I was starting to get pissed off about some of the things that, uh public contemporary Christian culture, like the CCM culture, the evangelical coolness, and what we know today is like all the things that were public, all the all the publicity, all the expectations of what anybody in that space was supposed to think, and I didn't agree with a lot of it. And I wanted to talk about it and I couldn't because it would mean that I wouldn't have a job anymore. Like some kind of classic examples of that is like remember a kid coming up to my tape, more than one kid, but people coming up, "Oh, you thank you. Your music saved me from a life of homosexuality. I give my music to your kids because she's butch and I don't want her to be gay." And I was like,
Oh my
in
god.
my things like people would just drive by and say like that to me 100 times a day, and I would hear it in the back of my head. I'm going, "I didn't fucking say that." Like, that's what I
Yeah.
wanted to say out loud, and I would say that out loud now if somebody attributed that to me. I would genuinely say that, but I didn't know how to say it, and I didn't know how I was gonna navigate it and was too exhausted to put up the fight. Um, and then a little bit too is I did kind of experiment a little bit with putting some of those theologies in my last record, The Way I Am, and it's kind of a nerd thing to say, but I was really kind of exploring. There was a couple of songs on there to me that were satirical. Like there's one song called The Way I Am, which is the title song. It's like it's better off this way to be deaf, dumb, and lame than to be the way I am. So I would when I first played that song out loud and at a show, the entire audience looked at me because I said, "You know, what we're saying about this move towards perfection is that if we're going to if your eye sins against you, pluck it out. If your tongue sins against you, chop it off." I was like, "How many I don't know about the rest of you, but there's not going to be anything left of me." Like there's nothing left of me now. Like I am beaten up, and then I just literally 2,000 people just stopped with looking at stopped enjoying my set and looked at me like I had said something either I don't know if it was bewildering or offensive to them, but it was just heartbreaking for me because I really wanted to actually talk about what we were saying to each other. And to find what I wanted to share was something really meaningful and tangible about our faith instead of all this dribble of what we were supposed to look like instead of how we were supposed to connect. And I felt like it was half falling on deaf ears, and it was just heartbreaking to me that I knew that I wasn't gonna be able to talk about this stuff, and that I even more so that I was too tired to try and find a way to talk about it well, and I was so angry about where things were at that I didn't even know what I was gonna set on fire first. So, and frankly, I living in that environment, I didn't feel like I was even had any hope to kind of find or share or put any of where I was really at and what I was really feeling spiritually into my music anymore. So, I spent a year, I think it was around I was talking about this recently to somebody, but I think it was around the summer of 2001, I decided I wasn't gonna do Christian music. I wasn't gonna tour anymore, and it took me a year to clear off my schedule, and the whole time, that whole year, I told everybody that was it. This is that I was gonna pack things up and then I was gonna go, and nobody believed me, and everybody acted like I disappeared when I stopped playing. It was like this weird thing, but um, and that's so I just quit, and it was heartbreaking. I probably spent 6 months after that kind of crying on a regular basis and having panic attacks about once a week, just going, "What did you do? You just totally screwed yourself." And, I felt like I lost something that I really cared about because I really did love playing music and I really did love connecting people. But I had a really hard time doing that. And this is the third thing, kind of the third and probably the principal reason why I left is I had a really difficult time having people consider me a contributor and that what I wanted from you was to look like this Christianity that was understood for me to be promoting this idea. I think one particular example about that was the rise of the purity movement had become very explicit, had a
Yeah.
title it had a title, it was being marketed, and it had, the true love waits and daddy daughter dances and it wasn't just hey, no sex outside of marriage and kind of the generalized, Christian judgment came with that. Now it had, a propaganda. It was being it was a propaganda being targeted particularly at young women. I saw boys not necessarily having the same kind of suicide crises over them losing their virginity the same way that women did. And I was like, I can't even be a part of this. This is so gross and so enraging to me that I just didn't even want to be around anyone associated with it. So it was just really troubling to me to be a role model of that, and I was really scared about maybe what I'd been contributing to for the last few years, that I needed to get out of town and figure out what I was going to do next with my life.
Yeah.
Did you
Go
think
ahead,
about
Casey.
maybe changing lanes, making like background music for pill commercials?
Like Viagra.
Yeah.
They're really
Going
sticking to the
exactly
parody
opposite.
You know
movement.
what? That's the move right
You
there.
know, the funny thing is, after I know that I had a short career in that, but I mean, I really cared about reaching people, and I really cared about transmitting and sharing with other people the hope that, the hope that I found in my faith is embedded in the way that I communicate with the rest of the world, and it still is to this day. And I could care less whether or not Jesus is the language you use for that. I mean, I certainly wouldn't use that language. I don't, I'm not necessarily, and I never was really, convinced that you had to find the religion in order to know hope, and in order to feel loved, and some kind of greater than yourself, amazing, sacred holiness. Like, and I don't mean holiness like purity in a white gown kind of thing. I just mean just sacred. You just feel it, that the kind of affect that you understand that something is just, it's the kind of thing where you just you're in awe, and you know that it's the time to be quiet and to appreciate the beauty of something and just let it rest. That kind of sacredness and holiness is kind of what I mean. But I mean, that's still embedded in my work today, and I don't think you have to. I'm convinced that you don't have to understand my religion to understand and feel the effects of that, and to encourage other people to seek that out in their lives, and to be agents of that in their lives. And so I took that very seriously. And so when I quit doing music, and I think growing up Christian, for sure, most every person I know who's lived wholeheartedly in a Christian environment kind of understands this, that it's when you believe in that, when you believe, like, let me say this. I mean, I believe that I would only, whatever measure of success I'd had was only because, or at least I'd been told the whole time, that the only value that had is because it was sanctioned by God, because I'd been faithful to God. That was the only reason why it had any goodness in it. And I didn't have any goodness in me, or there was no particular, gift of my own offering or my own agency that really had any value in there. It was all God using me. And the second that I divorced myself from that idea and said, I don't want to do that anymore, then I wasn't going to be gifted anymore. I wasn't going to have a gift to offer anyone anymore. And that was really a heartbreaking kind of thing. And it took me 7 years to get over that. It took me a long time. There's no way I was going to write a song even for a pill commercial, because I couldn't pick up my guitar, because I was so terrified that I was no longer, that I was nothing at this point, because I denied God, and I didn't anticipate ever wanting to do this in that way again. That my saying no to being a religious propaganda tool and being used by God in this way, that somehow that I wouldn't still be a gift and usable by God in that, in some way. And I know this sounds really strange, but, and I'm kind of embarrassed to say that that was really hard for me to get over, but it's something that's really amazing about that environment. If somebody tells you your whole life that you're nothing without this thing, you you kind of you have to test it's a real risk to test whether or not that's true. And I mean, LGBTQ community is the same thing. It's even more terrifying. You're talking about, if you give yourself over to the lusts of, this love with this same gender person or whatever, that, you're going to get cancer, or you're, you're going to die in a horrific, house fire or something like that. It's just such a horrible exchange of, you know, and to me, it's a horrible lie. Like, to me, and it took me a long time to kind of recover from that, is, I guess, is what I'm saying. And the great sense of loss and hurt that I had over being a musician in any way took me a very long time to kind of rediscover. First I had to kind of trust myself. I had then to work back and kind of trust those gifts again, and it was still a mystery as to whether or not they're, I was like, I don't know. It's going to, when I came back from my record in 2010, it was equally as scary because I'm like, I didn't know what was gonna happen. I'm like, people are gonna listen, this music's gonna suck. My music always sucked because it was Christian music. That was kind of what I thought. It's like the only reason that I had any like talent or the only reason why I had any success is basically because the Christian crazies just bought it and I did like nobody else would really love it or appreciate it. And when I say that I wanted it to be, I don't need to be loved in that sense, like if here's what I'll say to any musician, right? If you would like a song and people sing it again or they ask you to sing it again, then play it again. Like I've been saying yes to that. And there's no guarantee that any song that some songs are good songs and some create a community and others don't. Some are just songs that I like and you guys have never heard them. And then that's fine. I'm okay with that. But I think the thing that sucked is when I said yes to coming back and doing music. It What got me back up on my feet was understanding that this was something that was mine. Like, not in a possessive sense, but I knew it was like a gift. Like, I loved playing it and it to be able to connect and to play and to write songs, like, I'm not just good at it, like, it makes my life better. And it makes my life full and rich and wonderful and enjoyment to live. And when I share that with others, it makes us have a good time. Like we're all sharing in that. Like I can do something in a group of us that somebody else can't do that makes this group fun, and so do you. Like we all have these different gifts, right? And I was just terrified in coming back because I really wanted to get back to that. And what made it so scary was that I really, for the first time in my life, really wanted to do it. I really wanted to connect and I really wanted to be a blessing to other people. And I really wanted this to matter. I just didn't know that it would. And if it failed, I didn't know what that would say. Like I was going to have to fight the demon of, you know, you don't actually have any talent. You don't actually have a gift. This was all just a mirage. And even all the stuff that happened before was meaningless. And it could have failed, and I don't think it could have failed, and that would have proved that demonic notion. But I think for me, it was hard to say that I wanted to do it because I really wanted to do something that meant a lot to me, and that I had to admit that this really did mean a lot to me. And I can say now that the level of success of that actually has very little bearing on that. But I had to go through that thing and through all of those kinds of weird conditional and qualitative prosperity gospel things that I didn't even know that I carried around with me that I'd picked up along the way. And but the good news is that I found that as much as I loved and was passionate about people in career 1.0, I feel strangely like more fit to serve my community this time around than I ever did my first time around. I felt like, if I look backwards, I was like doing a lot of it mostly because like I think what kind of broke my back the first time around is I'd lost the hope in serving people, that it didn't really matter that, how I felt about serving people. It just had to look like I was serving people. And my spirit had been broken because I didn't feel like I could serve people in my true self and honestly. And in coming back to that in this 2.0, that was the scary part. Is like my hope is in that. Like I feel like now, ironically, I probably quote unquote minister more now and with a lot more, just I'm just showing up for people. I mean, I'll do a show for 90 minutes. I'll play my guitar and I'll play some songs and stuff. And I spend like 2 or 3 hours off sometime, a long time after the show, just talking to people. And some nights it's like really heavy religious trauma night, even though I didn't play any Christian music and we were in a bar, like just people were just telling me about their stories. But after the show, I just hang out with people. And, sometimes it's gay heavy night. Sometimes it's just everybody night. Like I'm just hanging out with people and getting to hear other people's stories and what a song will do to share our common ground. And for somebody to say, hey, let me tell you why this song was meaningful to me. And this is the story this is the experience that I had. I love that now way more than I ever did. And you can find me. I mean, I don't even care if you find me in the toilet. Like that's happened now. You can stick something underneath the stall in a public bathroom and go, "Jen, is that you? Will you sign this?" And I'll be
All
like,
right.
"All right,
Be
hold on a
careful
second."
what you endorse.
You know,
The end
but
of the roll of the toilet paper that they just like pulled it
hey,
all out and flushed it so they
it's
could hand that underneath.
I'm saying that because that's happened. I'm not encouraging it. But here's the funny thing. If I'd have done that in CCM, and it did happen in my CCM career, and I said, let's go out, hold on a second. Let's go outside the bathroom. Let me finish up in here and I'll meet you outside. That would be taken as a front by most quote unquote Christian people. And then I do that now here, and I don't know, it's just different. Nobody ever goes, "Oh my gosh. Oh, of course. I'm sorry. I just got too excited. I noticed those were your boots underneath the stall," or something like that. But like, okay, yeah, let me wash my hands. We'll go outside. I'm a lot more open to that. And I think, it's just amazing to be able to come back and to be able to figure out that I don't know. I'm really grateful that love still actually, when you love people and you actually give and you show up and make yourself available to other people, and when you figure out what your gifts are and you give them freely, and people appreciate that you're giving that, and people appreciate that that's a gift, in which I do. I feel like I'm the luckiest artist in the world. I mean, I can't tell you the last time I really felt taken advantage of. I feel like there's a great deal of gratitude, particularly for the people who have walked with me and known the journey that I've had, who they don't take for granted what it's taken me to walk up on that stage. And they know that there's something about there that I'm giving. I think you can. I'd like to think that people feel that, because it seems to me that that's reciprocated back, and I'm humbled by it. I'm all teary, just thinking about it.
So I have to ask you about, kind of preparing for this. I watched your Larry King interview, and I'm sure that like coming out publicly and like everything that followed, I'm sure it had to feel like, throwing yourself into the maelstrom a little bit. But that that whole interview was so strange. Like
It was
it
indeed
just
a strange experience for me as well. I'm glad you felt just as uncomfortable.
I texted Sam during the middle of it, like during the first part where it's just you and Larry King talking. And I'm like, do people regard Larry King as a good interviewer? He's really awkward and he interrupts all the time. And
Yeah.
then they put you in there with Ted Haggard, disgraced Christian minister, and some jerk off. I don't know who the other guy was, but total douchebag. It was just like the wildest, weirdest interview about some like very serious subject matter that
Yeah,
I don't
and
know. It
by
was
the
just the
way,
whole thing was
neither one of
strange.
those I did not know going into that, interview that either Ted Haggard or Bob Botsford were gonna be there.
You
So,
didn't?
Really?
no, I had no idea. I thought it
Oh
Oh
was
my
my
just
god.
god!
yeah, it was. And, Ted Ted was via satellite, so Ted wasn't in the studio. But Bob Botsford is an Orange County evangelical Christian pastor, and he had gotten onto that because he had somewhat gone viral with basically a "Don't do what Jennifer did" YouTube pastoral sermon or something, and was claiming that he knew that I had confided with him in my CCM days, that I knew I was gay and that I was struggling with that, and it was just some weird fantasy that he had
That
that
was a
I
weird
wasn't.
dream he had one night.
I guess, I don't know, but anyway, so he shows up, and he was actually at the studio and walks in the door, with 2 heavies, 1 on each side, like, seriously, like, sort of like, 2 beefy muscle guys, 1 on each side of him, in his entourage, and was excited, came in the doors, like, basically expressing to me privately or in that green room with everybody else that was in there, that he had basically come hoping that, I guess, that I would get myself right with God. Like, I think he genuinely thought that.
Whoa.
I mean, I wanna I mean,
The
I wanna
arrogance. That's the height of human arrogance, to think that you can
yeah, it
show up
was
in a a space that confrontational to be like, this is gonna do the trick.
Yeah, I about really screwed up a very important taping with CNN because in about 5 minutes of Bob walking into the room, I dressed him down and told him where he could shove him and his 2 crew boys, and told him basically that was how offensive that was. And because I'd seen this video that he'd done basically preaching against me, I was like, "You have no right to do that, and what you're telling is a lie anyway." Like, it's like, I don't know what you think that you're doing here, but you I drew a line of where my personal boundary was at, and I'd gotten him so upset that he was kinda shaking, and he almost walked out and blew up the whole thing. I was like, "Oh, great." That was a little bit maybe I'd been a bit heavy-handed, but I was pissed. I mean, I was really privately pissed, and it made the interview relatively difficult, so but, I
Yeah.
mean, I think on a private level, Bob had expressed to me if I believe I'm accurately remembering this, but it was my understanding that Bob came there to evangelicalize to me personally and had kind of this mindset of rescuing me from my gayness, um, as a
Delusions of grandeur
mission.
on his part, like,
I guess,
who's that
and
for? Like, who is I that's what I always ask when I hear about
yeah.
all the stuff that people have done over the years, showing up to you, wanting to put their hands on you, it's like wanting to bring you back into the it's like that it's like, it's never really for the person they're doing it to. It always feels more about
Yeah.
them, and
It's
Yeah,
like, I'm
that
gonna kick the winning field goal, and then I'm gonna turn to the crowd, and I'm gonna put my finger in the air
yeah,
yeah, and
and
it's
I
just
think
give
that
empty.
God the
actually
glory.
I think that actually happened to a degree, and, that was exactly somewhat of the that's not too far away from some of the conversation I thought I recall having had in the green room. I was like, "This you're not doing this for you." He kept saying that, "I love you, Jen. I'm here because I love you." And I'm like, "You don't know me enough to love me, and that's creepy anyway." Like, yeah, like, "Who the fuck are you? Like, why are you saying this? I don't know who you are." And I'm like, it who is this for is a really great question. I think that happened actually in the interview to a degree, going, like that's that was kind of like the biblical that was one of these kind of evangelical anti-gay arguments is like, we're telling you that this is wrong because we love you. And I'm like, if you love me, you would hear me and you would be hearing the truth and the story that I'm telling you, and you wouldn't be talking so much. Like, if you were here for me, this wouldn't you wouldn't have come here with the ulterior motive of having me walk out of the room a different person. If you loved me, you'd be asking the questions, what can I do to help? What can I do? What is going to help you have a fruitful, joyful, wonderful life? And in this particular argument, I was saying to him, and like, like, can you be a gay and Christian, which was, Larry King's premise, uh,
I can hear
driving
him saying it.
driving
He
question. But,
he is a
I'm sitting here
genius.
to Bob saying, I'm telling you my faith, however I understand it, however screwed it up it was on that particular day, and however much I own it or don't own it correctly by your mind. Here's what I'm telling you is it's been so important to me that you coming in here and telling me that I'm not is an offense. You're breaking my spirit, and I shudder to think with a 13-year-old kid who's sitting in your congregation, who's watching you do this and doesn't have anybody to talk to, doesn't have the muscle that I have to look you in the eye and say, "You're being an asshole right now." Like, that's the kid I'm standing up for right now. Like, I could not and we were having like, every time we would break the camera, it was just excruciatingly uncomfortable because I was not having it. Like, Bob was I think he was genuinely confused. I mean, to have,
What?
to be in his male position, to have a woman, I think, perhaps not cry in front of him when he exercised his certainty, and to continue to hold my position, like, and then, and then not only, I was glad I was able to do that in private, but it was really some kind of experience to have to continue to do that while the camera was rolling. um I wouldn't suggest everybody be able to do that, but I mean, I feel like I it was definitely a crucible that I don't know how I managed to do well. I mean, I definitely know I had to go I that taping was in LA, and I was in LA, and then that night I had a show in Orange County, which is about a 2-hour drive if you know the area. So I had to basically hop in a hire car just so I could make it to my show on time. And as soon as I got into the car, because I didn't have to drive, I was just sitting there. I just started shaking and crying because it was just so stressful of an experience to have gone through. Um, to be questioned like that from somebody like it was unfortunate, I think, for Bob Botsford, that what I think a lot of people recognized in his behavior and in what he was saying were the tropes of where Christianity kind of gets its difficulty in public for those who don't understand the culture. I mean, even inside of it, like, and what I've been trying to say for better than 20 years is like, you're missing the point of what you're trying to accomplish. You're not here for me anymore. You're here for the idea and for the performance of what you're saying. And if you would just listen, you would know that you're talking inside of a vacuum and you're not actually opening up and you're not serving anybody. You're serving the religion. You think, and perhaps you're doing it well for the things that you've picked that you want to believe in. Exercising that without listening is a disconnect from what love itself does. If, if an idea gives you a spark for how to love or gives you an idea or helps, any song that I write is going hopefully gives you, an idea or a picture, a 3.5 minute snippet of what somebody's experience about what love looks like. It might add to your arsenal, but you still have to go out and live it. You still have to love it. Otherwise, it's just a fantasy. It's just something that's somebody else made up. You have to be able to have any of the metaphors that we have or any of the language that we use, any of the principles, quotes, Bible, scriptures, movies, rom-coms, wherever it is that you see it, it still has to become practical in a way that goes, oh, yeah, now, and that's when we begin to write our own song. And I think that's when it really becomes interesting when we've experienced it enough that we can be able to start transmitting it, not as propaganda, but as something that we actually actionably do.
Well, to take a play out of Larry King's book, we actually have Bob Botsford joining the call right now to
I'd love to see him again. I
have a
really
round
would.
two. Round two.
Yeah,
Let's see.
I do have a quote from him here. See if you recognize this one.
And I have it from the highest authority that
Jennifer Knapp
sold his soul to the devil.
I've transitioned.
And that's unaltered. Now, some people might say that, that doesn't really give the full context of the remarks, but screw them.
I haven't quite sold my soul to the devil. If I could find it, I might take a couple bucks for it, though. When
At
I
least
find
you get
it,
an N64 back on your tour bus.
Oh my gosh. I have these days I have a PS4, which is gathering dust right now. It's on my audio rack. It was in my studio for about 5 minutes, but it's been so long. Now I know I'm like middle-aged when I'm like, oh, I don't have time to play PlayStation.
I feel that.
I'd like to.
Oh, man.
I forewent video games for a long time, and then this year took the plunge into the PS5, and it has not helped my productivity by any means, but it has been fun.
Yeah, I have not upgraded to a PS5. I won't get a new one until my PS4 is dead. I had a PS2 and then like it died. It literally died, and that's when I got like 2 year. I made it. It's probably like maybe 2011 or something when I got I don't know. It was 2 or 3 years after the PS4 had been out. Like,
Yeah.
I might have just gotten it the last couple years ago, I think, because I was in div school and I didn't have the PS4. I think I had my PS2.
And that's a
Being in
generational
school-
leap.
Yeah.
Like, people don't look like polygons anymore.
I know. I think the PS5. I think the reason why I got my PS4 so cheap because, like, yeah, that same spring or something, the PS5 was coming out. So,
and they're still making games for both of them, which I think is wild. They're like, we have the PS5, but we're also going to release a PS4 version of most of these. So it's so funny to me.
Some of my favorite games are still like PS2 classics, just dumb brain games, just 2D kind of. And I don't I'm not an online gamer, and I'm not like a first person shooter kind of person. They just make me seasick now. So I do most of what I do are like sports games. So like soccer or hockey or basketball or something like that. It just, cause I love that you're the repeatable play. It's basically like executing a perfect problem and logic problem solving and things like that. So I got, a couple of hours to throw into that. I don't have time for a storyline or, kind of overshooting real people in the head. I'm not really down with with that. So
Well,
I'm just an
when
old
my
lady who likes to play sports games.
when my brother and I were young, we had our Super NES, and for it, we had NHL Stanley Cup. I don't remember the year, but if you took the puck up to a certain part of the ice and you did a slap shot, it would go over the goalie's head and into the goal every single fucking time.
Yes.
Unstoppable move. And that was the days before patches. Nowadays, if a game is broken like that on release, within 5 minutes they patch it, and you can't break the game anymore.
I
So
know there's no like amazing hacks. You have to either have a code for, if you want a little head or a big head or like supersized balls. You you have to pay for it. You can have some kind of add-on. But yeah, those like weird little quirky things don't exist anymore. But those used to be kind of fun. Like you
Yeah.
don't
I
have
love
they're
it.
so
AABB,
realistic now.
AABB, AB.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right? Like it doesn't stop me from looking up though. Like I don't know what I was looking for the other day. I think I was playing my NHL 2000 and 22. I don't know what it is. I think it's NHL 22 from EA Sports. I was playing that the other day. I was like, surely there's got a way for me to be able to like get some more points that I wanted. There was no hack. I just wanted a hack. Kick
Do
it old school.
the NBA Jam style and just get fire coming out the back of your skates.
Exactly. Oh my god, I was such an NBA Jam junkie. I probably no, serious, true story. So, I used to play the arcade version of it. I used to when I was in, I think I was in coming home. I was the summer that I worked at college. I was working at Pizza Hut, and so I'd make all this. I was a Pizza Hut delivery driver in my hometown, and I would have like all like wads of cash from tips at the end of the night. So I would get off about 2 o'clock in the morning until about 5 o'clock in the morning. I would stand at the NBA Jam and just feed my entire night's earnings in quarter by quarter in NBA Jam. Like, I just couldn't get over it. It's the best feeling in the world when you got on fire and you just kept, like, slamming over the top of those guys. And
Yes.
I just couldn't believe I probably spent half my first, like, at least a semester's worth of tuition I wasted in the NBA because I can still go, "NBA Jam, halftime report."
Breaks the glass. He's
I
on
always played as
fire.
I always
Oh,
played as
was it
Bill
Marv
Clinton.
Albert?
Is that who it was? I don't even know.
Yeah, I
You
think
could
it's
I just
Marv
remember you
Albert's
could
voiceover.
play as Bill Clinton in the Sega Genesis version.
Oh my gosh, it was so good. I played as was it Sonic the Hedgehog? Could you get a Sonic the Hedgehog head?
Oh, I feel
Could
like
Am
you?
I
maybe you
remember that
could.
right?
I
I'm
don't
not
remember that. It's entirely possible. I don't
I used
remember.
to I used to get like my favorite was the Bulls. So I had Scottie Pippen. I would get a giant Scottie Pippen head, and I can't remember. Maybe it was what Grant. Grant would do the 3-pointers and just rain threes.
I
And then
think
Scottie
so.
Pippen, I would, catch on fire and, like, slam dunk, like, monster jams or whatever.
Ugh.
Wow. We're
So
I
old.
much
miss,
fun.
I miss when sports games were like, if sports games were still like that, I'd probably be playing them more.
A little two-dimensional
I'm not a
east-west
Yeah.
big
kinda
sports
games.
guy, but you don't have to be a sports guy to like getting your shoes on fire and slam dunking a basketball and shattering the glass every time. That's
It
always
was
fun.
so good.
That's
They
that's the
they
problem
ch
with video games now, though, is like you're like, well, I could buy a video game or I could take up woodworking. It's the same amount of effort that goes into both now.
It does. And that's like people because I am a bit of a sports game fan, but I haven't gotten into Madden. Like I peeled off a Madden a while ago because I needed to get basically I need to be a professional football player and understand the playbook to a degree that I needed to be able to read defenses as well as Patrick Mahomes. And since I'm really not into spending hours on becoming a college graduate level of a NBA, NFL playbooks, I'm out. I just want to push buttons and I want to go fast.
Button masher. Oh my god.
Well, Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us. We were so excited that you were willing to do this, and it's been great meeting you and hearing some of the details of your story.
Well, it was a pleasure to hang out with you guys. And even though one of you, Casey's from Kansas, I'm not going to hold that against you.
Yeah, I'm a transplant, so it's not quite as bad.
Well, you take care of my home state. Let's see if we can get at least a few people in the population voting for their own interests, and not against their own self interests. But yeah, it was a pleasure to talk to you guys. I really appreciate it. Thank you for having
Yeah,
me
this
on.
is so much fun.
All right, everybody. Well, thanks for listening. We will see you next time.